The last thing I remember was screaming at my tablet screen so loud I'm pretty sure my neighbors thought I was being possessed. Are you serious? I yelled, slamming my fist into my pillow. William, you absolute walnut. You're the king of the north, not the king of idiots. How can you believe Kuro? He literally fell onto a pillow and claimed it was a miscarriage. Men can't even. Oh wait, it's an Omegaverse novel. But still, the character Leo, a beautiful but tragically dim-witted Omega, had just been dragged to the chopping block. His final words were, "I didn't do it, I was just eating a bao bun." And the king, William, just looked at him with those cold, "I'm too hot to have a bra in" eyes and said, "Execute him." I was so angry my blood pressure spiked, my vision blurred, and, pop. I woke up to the sound of someone giggling. It wasn't a cute, I just saw a kitten, giggle. It was a, "I just put salt in your coffee," kind of snicker. "Look at him," a voice whispered. "He's been sleeping for 3 hours. The king is arriving for the selection today, and this little pig is still dreaming of mud." I opened my eyes. I wasn't in my studio apartment. I was in a room that looked like a Pinterest board for Victorian royal core. 3 guys in silk robes were standing over me, looking like they stepped out of a shampoo commercial. "Oh, the dummy is awake," said a guy with peacock feathers in his hair. This was Sasha, the side character bully who, if I recalled correctly, gets kicked out of the palace in Chapter 3 for stealing a silver spoon. I sat up, rubbing my head. Wait, my hands are tiny, and I smell like jasmine and peaches. "Did you just call me a dummy?" I asked, my voice coming out smooth and airy. Sasha blinked. The others froze. The old Leo would have tripped over his own feet and apologized for breathing their air. Well, yes, Sasha scoffed, regaining his ego. "You're Leo, the fool of the Count's family. Your own father sent you here just so he wouldn't have to look at your face anymore." I looked in a nearby gold-rimmed mirror. Long silver hair, big violet eyes, and a face so innocent it looked like I'd never had a single thought in my life. "Perfect. Well, Sasha," I said, hopping out of bed with a grin that didn't match my innocent face. "At least my face is worth looking at. Your eyebrows, on the other hand, look like 2 caterpillars having a wrestling match. You might want to fix that before the king sees you. It's distracting." Sasha's jaw dropped. "You, how dare, Leo, get dressed." An older servant, Hans, rushed in. "The Alpha King William is in the courtyard. All concubine candidates must line up. Move, you slow-witted boy." The courtyard was filled with the most beautiful Omegas in the kingdom. And then there was Kuro. He stood at the front, looking like a literal angel. White robes, teary eyes, and a scent of fresh raw that probably required a chemical lab to produce. He was the protagonist's favorite, the one who eventually gets me killed. "Oh, Leo," Kuro sighed as I took my spot at the very end of the line. He walked over, dabbing his non-existent tears with a lace handkerchief. "I heard you tripped and hit your head this morning. Is your poor, tiny brain okay?" The other candidates snickered. I leaned in close to his ear. "My brain is fine, Kuro. But your acting, it's a bit 1 star. Maybe try less, dying swan, and more, actual human." Kuro stiffened, his eyes widening. Before he could retort, the trumpets sounded. His Majesty, King William. The Alpha King walked in, and I have to admit, the author didn't lie. He was terrifyingly handsome, sharp jawline, shoulders broad enough to build a house on, and an aura that screamed, "I haven't felt an emotion since 2012. He walked down the line, dismissing Omegas with a single glance. Too loud, too boring, smells like cheap perfume. He stopped in front of Kuro. Kuro did a graceful bow, showing off his neck. "Your Majesty," Kuro whispered, sounding like a dying flute. William paused. "You'll do. Move to the inner palace." Kuro smirked at me over his shoulder. The villain wins round 1, I thought. Finally, William reached me. He looked at my file, then at my face. "Leo, the foolish Omega of the Count," William muttered, his voice like gravel and velvet. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I realized I wasn't bowing. I was staring at him like he was a math problem I was about to solve. "I'm just wondering," I said out loud. "Wondering what?" William's eyes narrowed. The courtyard went silent. No one spoke to the king like that. "I'm wondering if you're actually as mean as you look, or if you just need a high-fiber diet to help with that permanent scowl." The sound of Hans the servant fainting in the background was the only noise for 5 solid seconds. William leaned down, his alpha scent, dark cedar and burnt amber, crashing over me like a wave. Most omegas would be shaking. I just raised an eyebrow. "You're the fool," William whispered. "You shouldn't even know what fiber is." "I have my moments," I winked. William stared at me for a long time. A small, almost invisible twitch appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Keep him," William ordered the guards. "I want to see how long it takes for him to say something even stupider." Success, I thought, as I was marched toward the palace. Step 1. Don't die. Step 2. Make the king realize he's an idiot. Step 3. Ruin Kuro's life. This is going to be fun. The inner palace was less like a royal residence and more like a high-stakes sorority house where everyone carried concealed daggers and smelled like expensive flowers. By the 3rd day, I had already been, accidentally, tripped twice, had, mistakenly, been served cold porridge, and someone, "I'm looking at you, Sasha," had replaced my face cream with industrial-strength mint paste. My skin felt like it was North Pole adjacent, but my pores had never been clearer. "Oh, Leo, you look so refreshed," Kuro chirped, fluttering his silk fan. We were gathered in the rose garden for the mandatory morning social, which was basically a chance for all the concubines to sit in a circle and insult each other's lineage. I sat down, crossing my legs in a way that definitely wasn't omega-like. I looked at Kuro's elaborate hairpiece, a gold bird that looked like it was struggling for its life. "Thanks, Kuro," I said, leaning back. "You look great, too. That bird on your head. Is it a phoenix? Or is it a golden chicken expressing its inner turmoil?" Very avant-garde. The table went silent. Lord Minsung, a dainty omega who took delicate to a competitive level, gasped into his tea. "Leo, how can you speak to the king's favorite like that? Have you no shame?" "Shame is a social construct designed to keep people from eating the last dumpling," I replied, grabbing a macaron. "And I really like dumplings." Suddenly, the heavy scent of cedar and "I own your mortgage" filled the air. King William appeared at the garden archway, looking like he'd just stepped off a dark romance book cover. His cape caught the wind perfectly. I'm convinced he has a servant following him with a fan just for the drama. "Your Majesty." Everyone scrambled to stand up and bow. Kuro practically did a gymnastic floor routine to end up in a graceful curtsy right in William's path. "Your Majesty, you've arrived just in time," Kuro said, his eyes instantly welling with tears. Leo was he was being so brave. He's struggling so much with his simple thoughts, he started hallucinating chickens. William's gaze slid over Kuro, who was doing his best, pouty lip, face, and landed on me. I was currently mid-bite, a piece of blue macaron stuck to my lip. "Hallucinating chickens, Leo?" William asked, his voice dropping an octave. He walked over, looming over me. I swallowed. "Technically, it was a gold-plated poultry commentary, sire. But if you want to talk about hallucinations, let's talk about why you're wearing that much leather in 80-degree weather. Are you okay? Are you sweating? Do you need a damp cloth?" The guards behind William actually choked. William just stared at me. He looked like he wanted to execute me and kiss me at the same time. The high IQ part of me knew he was intrigued because I wasn't boringly submissive. The Leo part of me just wanted to see if his abs were real or if it was a very expensive corset. "You have a big mouth for a fool," William muttered, reaching down. For a second, I thought he was going to strangle me. Instead, his thumb brushed the crumb off my lip. His touch was warm, and my omega instincts did a little backflip I wasn't prepared for. "I have a big brain, too," I whispered, "but let's keep that a secret. It might scare the others." William's eyes flashed with a hint of a smile, a real one, before he turned to Kuro. "Kuro, stop crying. The salt is bad for the roses." Kuro's face went from angel to demon in approximately 0.2 seconds. Later that evening, I was in my room trying to figure out how to invent indoor plumbing in this era when Kuro dropped by. He was accompanied by Sasha and a few other lackeys. "Leo, darling," Kuro said, his voice dripping with fake honey. "The king is hosting a private dinner tonight. He asked me to bring you this." He handed me a small, velvet box. Inside was a necklace featuring a massive, blood-red ruby. "It's the heart of the north," Sasha whispered, eyes wide with faux awe. The king only gives it to the one he intends to make queen. Red flag. Red flag. Giant, flaming red flag, my brain screamed. Oh, wow, I said, acting like the old Leo. So pretty. Like a big cherry. Yes, exactly. Kuro smirked. Wear it tonight. Don't tell anyone. It's a surprise for him. As soon as they left, I didn't put it on. I didn't even keep it in the box. I took the necklace, wrapped it in a dirty sock, and shoved it deep inside a hollowed-out loaf of bread I'd saved from dinner. 10 minutes later, the door kicked open. Guards. And behind them, a very distraught Kuro and a very furious King William. Your Majesty. I saw him take it. Kuro cried, clinging to William's arm. I saw Leo sneak into your private study and steal the heart of the North. I tried to stop him, but he hit me. Kuro pointed to a tiny, perfectly applied smudge of red makeup on his cheek. William looked at me, his face like stone. The air in the room grew heavy with his alpha command. Leo, did you steal the royal heirloom? Steal? I asked, looking confused. I stood up and started checking my pockets. I can't even find my other sock. William, do you think I have the mental capacity to pull off a heist? Search the room. William barked. Kuro was smirking. He had clearly planted a second fake necklace or expected me to be wearing the one he gave me. The guards tossed my bed, emptied my drawers, and threw my clothes everywhere. Found it. A guard shouted. He pulled a velvet box out from under my pillow. Kuro gasped. Oh, Leo, how could you? William opened the box. His expression didn't change, but he held it up. This. Inside the box was a half-eaten chicken wing. The silence was deafening. That's my snack for later, I said, crossing my arms. It's very precious to me. But I don't think it's the heart of the North unless your kingdom is much more delicious than I thought. Kuro's eyes turned into saucers. But it was. I saw him. I walked up to Kuro, leaning in close. You saw me do what, Kuro? Put a chicken wing in a jewelry box. That's a weird hobby to spy on. I then turned to William. Your Majesty, I'm offended. You think I'd steal a ruby? Red isn't even my color. It clashes with the innocent fool vibe I've got going on. William looked from the chicken wing to Kuro's trembling form, then back to me. He stepped closer, his shadow swallowing me. Where is the real necklace, Leo? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. I'll tell you, I whispered, but only if you fire the person who does your hair. Those spikes are a safety hazard. William actually let out a short, sharp bark of laughter. It was the first time the palace had heard him laugh in years. Kuro looked like he was about to have a literal stroke. Everyone out, William ordered. Except Leo. The doors slammed shut with a thud that echoed through the marble hallways, leaving me alone with a king who looked like he was vibrating between, I should throw you in the dungeon, and, I want to know your skincare routine. William stood there, his arms crossed over that massive chest. The heart of the North, Ruby was still missing. Kuro was probably outside hyperventilating into a silk pillow, and I was standing next to a pile of tossed laundry holding a half-eaten chicken wing. The chicken wing, Leo. Really? William's voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder. It was seasoned with rosemary and spike, Your Majesty. A delicacy, I said, casually tossing the wing back into the velvet box. I wiped my hands on a discarded tunic. Now, are we going to keep staring at each other until the moon goes down, or are you going to admit your favorite concubine is a pathological liar with the IQ of a lukewarm bowl of soup? William took a step forward, his alpha aura flaring. It was heavy, intoxicating, like the smell of a forest fire after the rain. Most Omegas would be on their knees by now, whimpering for mercy. I just leaned against the bedpost and checked my fingernails. You aren't a fool, William stated. It wasn't a question. The Leo the First knew couldn't count to 10 without using his toes. He certainly didn't know the word, pathological. People change, Will. Sometimes they hit their head, sometimes they realize being the palace doormat has terrible benefits, I shrugged. Besides, Will, sounds much friendlier, don't you think? It suits your softer side. The one you hide under all that stabbing. Do not call me, Will, he growled, though he didn't move to stop me. He stepped even closer, pinning me between his body and the bedpost. He was so tall I had to crane my neck. Where is the ruby? If it's found in this room, I have to execute you. It's the law. The law is a bit dramatic, don't you think? It's just a shiny rock. I sighed, reaching into the waistband of my silk trousers. William's eyes widened, his gaze dropping to my hands. What are you? I pulled out a crumpled, greasy paper napkin. Inside was the heart of the North. It sparkled brilliantly, mocking the dim candlelight. I didn't steal it, I said, holding it up by the chain. Kuro gave it to me as a gift from you. He told me to wear it as a surprise. I figured the surprise was me getting my head chopped off, so I decided to play a little game of hide and seek. The ruby stayed in my pocket. The chicken wing went in the box. A classic switcheroo. William took the necklace, his fingers brushing mine. A jolt of electricity shot up my arm. The mate bond trope of this novel was clearly working overtime. He tried to frame you for a capital crime, William muttered, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the jewel. And you just played with him. You weren't scared. William, I've had harder exams than Kuro's schemes, I laughed. He's predictable. He uses tears as a weapon because he thinks you're a sucker for a delicate omega. Are you a sucker? William leaned down, his face inches from mine. I could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. I used to be. I thought a quiet omega was a safe one. But you're a migraine in silk robes. But I'm the most interesting migraine you've ever had, I whispered back, totally leaning into the tension. Suddenly, the door creaked open. A small, nervous head popped in. It was Min, the youngest kitchen servant and the only person who had been nice to me since I transmigrated. Lord Leo. I brought the extra gravy you asked for. Min froze, seeing the king looming over me in a very compromising position. Oh, SHESSH. I'm so sorry. I didn't see the king. I'm blind. I'm temporarily deaf. Min, stay, I called out, slipping under William's arm like a cat. The king was just leaving. He has to go tell Kuro that he's grounded. Or executed. Whatever the vibe is tonight. William turned, looking annoyed at the interruption. I am not leaving. We are not finished. Oh, we are, I said, taking the gravy boat from a trembling Min. I have a high IQ brain to feed. You have a kingdom to run. Also, you should probably check Kuro's room. I bet you'll find the second fake ruby he bought to discover on me just in case the first plan failed. He's thorough, I'll give him that. William looked at me with a mixture of fascination and genuine confusion. Who are you? I'm Leo, I said, taking a sip of the gravy. Don't judge me, it was cold. The new and improved version. 2.0. Now with 50% more sass and a functional prefrontal cortex. Get used to it, Will. Outside, in the hallway, Kuro was pacing like a caged tiger. Sasha was right beside him, fanning him frantically. He's still in there. Kuro hissed, his beautiful face contorted with rage. Why hasn't the king dragged him out by his hair? I put the ruby in the box. I saw it. Maybe the king is torturing him. Sasha suggested hopefully. Just then, the door opened. William stepped out. He looked perfectly composed, but he was holding the heart of the North. Your Majesty, Kuro cried, instantly switching back to fragile mode. You found it. Oh, the wicked boy. Shall I call the executioner? William looked down at Kuro as if he were a particularly persistent bug. The ruby was in Leo's possession because you gave it to him, Kuro. Kuro's breath hitched. I don't know what you mean. He must have lied. Leo doesn't lie, William said, and I actually cheered a little from inside the room. He's too busy being the most interesting migraine I've ever met. Kuro, you are confined to the East Wing. If I see you near the Rose Garden, or Leo, for the next month, I'll have you sent back to your father's estate in a vegetable cart. A vegetable cart, Kuro shrieked, his voice hitting a frequency that probably shattered glass in the next county. As they were marched away, I poked my head out the door. Hey Kuro, I shouted. Kuro turned, his eyes bloodshot with fury. Try the cabbage, I yelled with a grin. It's great for the complexion. William glanced back at me, shook his head, and walked away. But I saw it. The corner of his mouth definitely twitched. I went back inside and sat on my bed. One villain down, about 20 more to go. And a king who is starting to look less like a walnut, and more like a snack. The palace was buzzing like a disturbed beehive. Kuro, desperate to regain his top concubine, status after the Ruby disaster, had decided to go full on cliché. He had procured a vial of midnight ember, a potent alpha aphrodisiac that supposedly makes a man see his soulmate in whoever is standing closest. Too bad for Kuro, I have a nose for chemistry and a very low tolerance for nonsense. I was in the kitchen helping Min reorganize the spice rack, because apparently, high IQ Leo can't stand disorganized cumin, when I saw Kuro's personal maid, Sarah, acting suspicious near the king's evening wine decanter. Min, I whispered, pointing with a cinnamon stick. Do you see that? She's shaking more than a leaf in a hurricane. That's the, I'm poisoning the monarch, look. Min gasped. Should we stop her? No, I smirked, adjusted my silk robes. I have a better idea. Let's just redirect the traffic. 5 minutes later, the king's wine was served. Kuro was waiting in his finest, most transparent silk nightgown in the West Garden, posing under a willow tree like he was auditioning for a perfume ad. The plan was simple. William drinks, William gets hot, William sees Kuro, and boom, scandalous night ensues. But William, being the stubborn Walnut I've come to appreciate, didn't drink his wine in the dining hall. He took the decanter back to his study, which, purely by architectural coincidence, is right next to my room. I was sitting on my bed, reading a boring book on kingdom economics, and mentally correcting the interest rates when my door didn't just open, it erupted. William stood there. His tie was undone, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were glowing a shade of amber that basically said, I am a predator and you look like a very tasty snack. Leo, he growled. The scent of cedar and burnt amber was so thick I could practically taste it. Whoa, Will, you look like you've been microwaved, I said, standing up. I walked over to him, sniffing the air. Yep, midnight ember. Smells like cheap lust and desperation. Kuro really outdid himself. William lunged forward, grabbing my waist and pinning me against the door. His breath was hot against my neck. I can't, stay away. My head is spinning. That's the drug, big guy, I said, trying to stay professional even though my heart was doing the Macarena. You should probably jump in a cold fountain. Or eat a lemon. I don't want a lemon, William hissed, burying his face in the crook of my neck. He took a deep, shaky breath of my peach and jasmine scent. I want you. I've wanted to shut that smart mouth of yours since the moment you insulted my hair. Wait, really? I blinked. That's your kink. Intellectual verbal abuse. We could have saved so much time. He didn't give me time to finish my sentence. He kissed me, and it wasn't a king-like, dignified kiss. It was hungry, desperate, and surprisingly sweet. William, I gasped as he lifted me off my feet like I weighed nothing. If we do this, you're going to have a massive hangover tomorrow. And I'm going to remind you of everything you said while you were high on Kuro's juice. Worth it, he muttered, dropping me onto the silk sheets. The night was, well, let's just say the author of this novel really knew how to write a passionate alpha. But even in the heat of it, my brain wouldn't shut up. You know, I panted, as he bit softly at my shoulder, the chemical structure of this aphrodisiac is actually quite fascinating. It targets the amygdala while, oh. Okay, never mind the science. Do that again. Leo, William groaned, pinning my wrists above my head. Shut up. For once in your life, just stop talking. Make me, I challenged, smirking. He did. Frequently. The sun rose, hitting me right in the eyes. I felt like I'd been hit by a carriage, but a very expensive carriage. Next to me, William was stirring, groaning as the midnight ember wore off and the giant alpha headache set in. My head, he croaked, clutching his temples. I told you, rosemary tea and a lobotomy are the only cures, I said, sitting up and wrapping a sheet around myself. I looked like a disaster, but a victorious one. Suddenly, the door burst open. Again. It was Kuro, followed by a troop of guards and Sasha. Kuro was wearing a devastated expression, clutching a silk handkerchief. Your Majesty, I have been searching for you all night. I heard noises from this room, horrible, scandalous noises. I was so worried Leo had kidnapped you. Kuro shrieked. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw the scene. William, shirtless and looking like a Greek god with a migraine, was sitting in my bed. I was casually eating a grape I found on the nightstand. Oh, hey guys, I waved. You're early. The king and I were just discussing the national budget. It was very taxing. Lots of physical labor involved. Kuro's face went a shade of purple I didn't know humans could achieve. But, the wine. You were supposed to come to the garden. I was the one who. You were the one who what, Kuro? William asked, his voice cold enough to freeze the room. He stood up, and even with a headache, his alpha presence made the guards take 3 steps back. You were the one who drugged my wine. No. I mean, I was protecting you. Kuro stammered, his eyes darting to Sasha, who was busy trying to melt into the wallpaper. You drugged the king, I said, standing up making sure my sheet was secure. I'm a genius, not a nudist. And since I'm the fool, I'll explain it simply, that's treason. Like, the losing your head kind of treason. Kuro fell to his knees. Your Majesty, I did it for love. Leo is a snake. He intercepted you. He stole the night that belonged to me. Actually, I chimed in, you stole the night. I just provided the venue. And the conversation. And apparently, the stress relief. William looked at Kuro with pure disgust. Guards, take him to the dampest, smelliest cell in the North Tower. I'll deal with his execution, or exile, once my head stops pounding. Wait, Kuro yelled as he was dragged away. I'm pregnant. I feel it. I had a vision. You can't kill the mother of your heir. The room went dead silent. I looked at William. William looked at me. I looked back at Kuro. Kuro, we've been here for 10 minutes. The drug wore off 4 minutes ago. Biology doesn't work that fast, even in a trashy romance novel. You aren't pregnant, you're just bloated from all that spite. I'll frame you for this, Leo. Kuro screamed as the door shut. I'll make you pay. William sighed, sinking back onto the bed. He looked at me, a soft, weary smile touching his lips. He's never going to stop, is he? Probably not, I said, crawling back over to him and handing him a glass of water. But don't worry. I've got a high IQ, a sharp tongue, and apparently, the king in my bed. I think I can handle a fake pregnancy plot. William pulled me into his arms, kissing the top of my head. You're an insufferable brat. But I'm your insufferable brat, I teased. Now, tell me more about that, shutting me up, thing from last night. I think I forgot the details. The palace went from execution ground to baby shower in record time. It was enough to give me whiplash. 1 minute, Kuro was being dragged to the North Tower, and the next, he was being carried back on a gilded litter because the royal healer, a man named Elder Oren, who looked like he'd been mummified while still alive, had declared the impossible. It is a miracle of the stars. Elder Oren proclaimed in the Great Hall, his voice shaking with ancient drama. Lord Kuro is indeed with child. The Alpha King's lineage is secured. I stood by the pillar, munching on a dried apricot. A miracle, I muttered to myself. In biology, we call that a statistical anomaly, or a bold-faced lie. William was sitting on his throne, looking like he wanted to fight a dragon just to get out of the conversation. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for help. Your Majesty, Kuro purred, draped in 3 layers of white silk and resting a hand on his perfectly flat stomach. I know you were heavily intoxicated 3 weeks ago, the night before the selection. You came to my chambers in a daze. You don't remember, but my body remembers. The Council of Elders, a group of 5 grumpy old men who lived for tradition and fiber supplements, nodded in unison. The king was seen entering the West Wing that night. Elder Bastian barked, glaring at me. It is settled. Lord Kuro shall be moved to the Empress suite. He carries the future of the North. Wait a minute, I stepped forward, my high IQ siren blaring in my head. William, were you that drunk? Because usually, when someone is that drunk, they're more likely to vomit on a shoe than produce an heir. William rubbed his temples. I remember drinking with the generals. I remember the hallway, and then nothing until the next morning. I woke up in my own bed. Exactly. Kuro cried, dabbing his eyes. You left me in the middle of the night to protect my reputation. How noble. I looked at Kuro. He looked smug. Too smug. My nose caught his scent. It was still fresh rain, but there was an undertone of something metallic. Something that wasn't William Cedarwood. Weeks passed, and Kuro became a nightmare. He demanded strawberries in the middle of a snowstorm. He demanded the guards bow to his stomach. He even tried to have my room turned into a nursery for his future child's toys. I was sitting in the library, researching omega gestation periods and how to expose a fraud without getting beheaded, when Sasha walked in, carrying Kuro's shopping bags. "Oh, look, it's the favorite who got demoted to the guy who lives near the king," Sasha sneered. "Kuro says when the baby is born, you'll be his personal footstool." "Sasha," I said, not looking up from my book. "If you don't stop talking, I'm going to calculate the exact trajectory needed to throw this heavy encyclopedia at your head. It's physics. You wouldn't understand." Sasha huffed and left, but as I stood up to put the book away, the world tilted. A wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to grab the shelf. My stomach did a somersault, and suddenly, the smell of the old parchment in the library, which I usually loved, smelled like rotting garbage. "Oh no," I whispered, leaning my head against the cool wood. No, no. I'm a genius. I use logic. Logic says that one night with William was statistically significant. The next morning, the entire court was gathered for the blessing ceremony. Kuro was sitting on a literal pedestal, eating grapes. "I feel so faint," Kuro sighed loudly, looking at William. "The little prince is demanding so much energy. Your Majesty, shouldn't Leo be serving me? It's good practice for his future role as a servant." William looked ready to snap a pencil. "Leo is not a servant, Kuro." "He is." "I'm currently about to throw up," I interrupted, walking into the room. I looked pale, my silver hair a bit messy. Kuro laughed. "Oh, look. The fool is jealous. He's trying to pretend he's sick to get attention. How pathetic." "It's not jealousy, Kuro," I said, grabbing a piece of bread from a tray to settle my stomach. "It's called sympathy pains. Or, more likely, it's called, the king's actual child is currently making me hate the smell of your perfume." The room went silent. William stood up so fast his chair fell over. "Leo." William breathed, his voice a mix of terror and hope. "I need a doctor," I said, pointing at Elder Oren. "But not that one. He's old and his eyes are failing. I want the independent medic from the town, and I want him to check both of us." Kuro's face went white. I am the king's priority. You can't suggest I'm lying." "I'm not suggesting you're lying about being pregnant, Kuro," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy tone. I walked right up to his pedestal. "I think you are pregnant. I just think the father isn't wearing a crown. I think the father is someone who smells like, oh, I don't know, the metallic oil they use on the practice swords in the guards' barracks." I caught a glimpse of a guard in the back, Captain Jackson, who suddenly looked very interested in his own boots. You fool," Kuro screamed. "Elders, protect the heir." "Enough," William roared. The alpha pressure was so intense the plates on the table rattled. He walked down to me, his hand hovering over my waist, not yet daring to touch. "Leo, are you sure?" "William, I can calculate the square root of 1.4 million in my head," I said, looking him in the eye. "I know my own body. Something is growing in here, and unlike Kuro's miracle, mine doesn't involve a convenient memory blackout." "We will have the exam," William declared, his eyes burning with a fire that made the elders shrink. "Both of them. If Leo is lying, he will be confined. If Kuro is lying." William didn't finish the sentence, but the way he looked at the North Tower said enough. I felt another wave of nausea and leaned into William's side. He immediately wrapped his arm around me, anchoring me. "You okay?" he whispered. "I'm fine," I muttered. "Just remind me to invent ginger ale after this. Being an omega is 0/10, would not recommend to a friend." Kuro let out a sob, but for the first time, no one moved to comfort him. The game was changing, and the fool was finally holding all the cards. The great hall was packed. It felt less like a royal palace and more like the season finale of a reality TV show. In one corner, Kuro was clutching his stomach, weeping about royal stress. In the center, a neutral medic from the neutral territories, Drive Aris, was setting up his instruments. "This is an insult," Elder Bastian shouted, his white beard wagging. "To doubt a pregnant omega is to doubt the heavens." "Oh, hush, Bastian," I snapped, sitting on a velvet chair and sipping a cup of ginger root tea I'd forced the cook to make. "The heavens are fine. It's the math that's bothering me. Dr. Aris, if you please. Examine the miracle first." Kuro was forced onto the examination bench. Dr. Aris, a no-nonsense beta, performed a series of checks. He used a mana stone, a device that glows based on the alpha signature of the sire. He pressed the stone to Kuro's belly. It glowed a dull, muddy brown. The room went silent. That's strange, I said, leaning forward. William's alpha scent is cedar and amber. That usually glows bright gold. Brown is, what is brown, Doctor? Dr. Aris adjusted his glasses. Brown is the signature of a commoner alpha. Usually someone who works with iron or weaponry. I turned my head slowly toward the back of the room. Captain Jackson, you've been very quiet. Do you have a favorite color? Is it brown? The captain of the guard turned so pale he looked like he'd been bleached. Kuro shrieked, the stone is broken. It's a trick by the fool. Now, check me, I said, standing up and pulling my robe tight over my slightly bloated stomach. Dr. Aris moved the stone to me. The moment it touched my skin, the room was blinded by a radiant, shimmering gold. It was so bright it cast shadows of the elders against the walls. It smelled faintly of cedar and jasmine. William gasped, his hand flying to his mouth. Leo. Well, I said, looking at the elders. Unless William has been moonlighting as a blacksmith, I think we have a winner. Kuro, care to explain why your prince is actually a junior guard? I. Kuro collapsed, his face a mask of horror. William, I was lonely. You never looked at me. Jackson listened to me. And apparently did more than listen, I remarked. Take them away. And someone get me a pickle. This drama is making me hungry. With the truth revealed, Kuro and Jackson were exiled to a distant farm where I heard Kuro has to actually work for a living, the true punishment. The elders were forced to write a formal apology to me on parchment made of the finest vellum, which I used to make paper airplanes. William, however, was a changed man. He followed me everywhere. If I tripped on a rug, he wanted to execute the rug. If I coughed, he summoned 3 doctors. Will, stop, I said one afternoon in the garden, 9 months later. I was now roughly the size of a small planet. I am a high IQ genius. I can navigate a hallway without a royal escort. You are carrying the future of this kingdom, Leo, William said, his voice soft as he rubbed my back. And, you're carrying my heart. I was so stupid. I almost lost you because I believed the lies of everyone else. To be fair, I said, leaning my head on his shoulder, I was pretending to be a fool. I'm just very good at acting. But from now on, no more secrets. Except for where I hid your favorite dagger. You were getting too stabby with it. William laughed, kissing my forehead. I love you, you insufferable, brilliant man. The birth was, in a word, loud. I believe I told William that if he touched me again in the next 50 years, I would dismantle his throne with a spoon. But then, the crying started. 2 distinct voices. Twins, drive, Aris announced, looking exhausted. An alpha and an omega. A few hours later, the palace was quiet. I was propped up on silk pillows, holding 2 bundles of joy. William was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at them with more wonder than he'd ever shown his entire kingdom. Look at them, William whispered. The first baby, the alpha, had a shock of dark hair and a tiny, permanent scowl. He looked exactly like a miniature William. We named him Liam. The second baby, the omega, had silver hair and big, bright violet eyes. He wasn't crying, he was staring at a shiny spoon on the bedside table with intense, analytical focus. He looked exactly like me. We named him Lucian. Liam is already trying to command the room, I noted, watching the dark-haired baby grip William's finger with surprising strength. And Lucian is definitely trying to figure out the structural integrity of that spoon. We're in trouble, Will. We have a genius for a consort and a king for a father, William said, leaning in to kiss me, then the babies. I think the kingdom can handle a little trouble. I looked out the window at the North Star, thinking back to the moment I died in my old world. I had cursed the book, hated the king, and pitied the fool. Now, I was the one writing the ending. You know, I said, as Lucian successfully grabbed the spoon and looked at me with a triumphant, goo. I think I like this version of the story much better. Me too, William whispered. And for the first time in the history of the North, the king didn't look like a walnut, he just looked like a man in love.